A wall of blinding white stretches endlessly beneath the 6 P-38 Lightnings and 2 lumbering B-17 flying fortresses of Operation Bolero. 8 aircraft, fresh from the factories of American industry, streak eastward across the North Atlantic on their way to join the fight in Europe. Their mission is routine, their destination is Scotland, and their pilots believe they're flying a corridor well-charted and well-understood. But nothing in Greenland is routine. As the formation approaches the island, the weather turns like a fist. Clouds stack on clouds, forming a suffocating maze of ice-cold moisture. Winds shear sideways with the strength of iron cables. The pilots check their fuel, low. They check their altitude, dropping. They check the coastline, vanished. Radar is primitive, navigation primitive, and hope thinner than the ice forming on their canopies. In the lead B-17, Lieutenant Harry Smith radios back to the P-38s. Visibility dropping to 0. We need options. The answer that comes through the static is grim. Return route is closed. Scotland's socked in. Iceland's unreachable. Greenland's our only chance. The island lives up to its name, but only the green part fools newcomers. The ice cap is a frozen world unto itself, featureless, treacherous, and deadly to land on. But with fuel nearly gone, the squadron has no choice. They break out of the storm just long enough to spot a patch of relatively flat ice. The pilots brace, tighten their harnesses, whisper quick prayers, and guide their heavy, fuel-starved machines toward survival. One by one, the P-38s settle onto the ice like metal birds folding their wings. Their skids carve long scars across the snow before they grind to a halt. The B-17s follow, their massive frames sinking slightly into the powder. Engines wind down, ticking and freezing in the brutal cold. Silence replaces the storm. Miraculously, not a single crewman is killed. The men gather on the ice, stamping their feet, shaking hands, staring at the surreal sight. 8 perfectly good aircraft resting on a white desert in the middle of nowhere. They hope rescue will be quick. They hope recovery teams will salvage the planes. They hope this is a temporary inconvenience. It isn't. Storm after storm buries the aircraft in drifts so deep the wings vanish within days. Temperatures plunge to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice creeps upward around the fuselages like a slow, patient predator. By the time rescuers finally make contact with the stranded crews and extract them, on foot, then by sled, then by ship, the aircraft have already begun their frozen descent into the glacier. The Lost Squadron is born. For the rest of the war, no effort is made to recover the machines. Greenland's ice cap is vast, harsh, and indifferent to human plans. The P-38s and B-17s are written off, their coordinates marked but essentially forgotten. Snow falls, ice accumulates, time moves forward. By the 1950s, rumors swirl among veterans and aviation enthusiasts. Those planes must still be there somewhere. They're crushed, guaranteed. No plane could survive 50 years in a glacier. But curiosity persists. The idea of 8 pristine World War II aircraft preserved like insects in amber becomes a legendary whisper in aviation circles. By the 1970s, a group of passionate adventurers, Pat Epps, Richard Taylor, and several others, decide to take the legend seriously. They mount expeditions, trekking across the ice with crude radar equipment, food packed in crates, and optimism packed in heartbeats. The first trip yields nothing. The second, the same. Snowfields shift. Ice flows move. What was once a landing site becomes an ever-changing white labyrinth. The glacier swallows secrets whole, but the team refuses to give up. They study glaciation patterns, consult geologists, and learn something astonishing. The planes didn't simply get buried by snowfall. They were dragged downward and sideways by the slow, grinding motion of the glacier itself, like pennies sinking in a river of frozen glass. Years turn into decades, expeditions turn into obsessions, and in 1992, on the 7th major attempt, they find it. A radar technician notices a faint echo at a depth no one expected. 268 feet beneath the surface, deeper than the height of the Statue of Liberty lying on its side, they detect a solid mass. The team drills down inch by inch through layers of ice that formed long after the war ended. The auger returns a flake of olive-drab paint. A roar of disbelief erupts in the camp. Men who spent half their lives searching stand stunned in the polar wind. Against every expectation, the Lost Squadron is real. And one of the P-38s, serial number 41763, is intact. The aircraft is entombed in a bubble of compressed snow and ancient ice, perfectly preserved like a prehistoric relic. The propellers gleam under the work lights. The cockpit glass is cracked but present. The fuselage shows the same green shade it wore in 1942. It takes weeks of work, melting chambers, steam hoses, reinforced tubes lowering deeper than some mines. Once exposed, the P-38 must be disassembled piece by piece and hauled up a vertical ice shaft. Each bolt, each rib, each wing spar is brought back to the surface with reverence. The team christens the P-38 with a new name, Glacier Girl. The restoration takes nearly a decade. Craftsmen rebuild crushed sections, technicians design new components matching 1942 specifications, and historians study every scrap of original material. The P-38's famous twin-boom shape slowly reemerges, not as wreckage, but as rebirth. Finally, in October 2002, 60 years after she landed on Greenland, Glacier Girl rolls down a runway in Middlesboro, Kentucky. The engines ignite with a rumble that sends shivers through every onlooker. Flames lick from exhaust stacks, propellers spin. And the P-38, lost to the ice for half a century, lifts into the air once more. The crowd watches something impossible. A time machine in motion, a fighter plane pulled from the Ice Age, reborn. A ghost from 1942 slicing through the sky with the same fierce grace she had on the assembly line. Glacier Girl becomes a symbol, not just of aviation history, but of endurance, of stubbornness, of what human beings can achieve when obsession meets courage. She transforms from military hardware into a testament to discovery, to preservation, to the long arm of history reaching back into the present. The Lost Squadron story reminds us that the world still holds secrets, that our past is never truly gone, and that even in the coldest, most unforgiving places on Earth, the echoes of human ingenuity and human survival wait patiently to be found again. Glacier Girl's return to the air sends ripples far beyond the airfield. For many watching, it feels like a crack opening between centuries, proof that the artifacts of our past aren't just museum pieces, but living things, capable of breathing again if someone cares enough to find them. But before she could fly, before she could even be pieced back together, her rescuers had to confront the brutal truth of what they'd pulled her from. The Greenland ice cap is not a burial ground, it's a conveyor belt. As decades pass, snow layers compress into ice, which flows outward like a frozen river. What fell on the surface in 1942 didn't simply remain perched where it landed. Instead, it slowly moved, inch by inch, year by year. What had been a smooth expanse became a jagged landscape. When modern teams returned with sonar, expecting to find aircraft just below their boots, the truth staggered them. The planes had drifted nearly 2 miles from their original coordinates and sank hundreds of feet beneath what used to be open air. This realization fuels a deeper respect for the men who landed there. Back in 1942, as the crews huddled on the ice waiting for rescue, their stranded aircraft seemed like temporary inconveniences, material losses to be recovered later. But the Glacier had other plans. By the time the men returned to civilization, the war effort made the retrieval of grounded aircraft trivial compared to larger strategic needs. The planes stayed behind, slowly disappearing under the weight of snow, then time, then history. Nobody imagined that one day a group of civilians would commit years of their lives and a small fortune to bring them home. And that is where the true heart of the story lies. Not in the landing, not even in the discovery, but in the tenacity of the people who refused to let the Lost Squadron remain lost. The expeditions defied logic, flying to remote ice fields in small cargo planes, building makeshift camps on shifting terrain, dodging crevasses, storms, and equipment failures. One trip ended with the team pinned inside their tents for 3 straight days, listening to winds roar like jet engines. Another saw their drilling equipment freeze solid overnight, buried under a sudden layer of snow. They nearly walked away more than once, but every failure was met with a new resolve. "There's a P-38 out here," they kept saying. "We just have to figure out where the glacier hit it." When the auger finally came up with that single flake of green paint, it was more than a clue. It was vindication. The ice could bury history, but it couldn't erase it. Extraction was another battle entirely. Imagine descending a narrow tube of ice deeper than most subway tunnels. Imagine working in temperatures that freeze exposed skin in minutes. Imagine using hot water jets to carve a cavern around a machine built for the sky, not for a frozen tomb. As they melted downward, steam filled the shaft in waves. Metal groaned, then glittered, then breathed again under lamplight. The team had found not a pile of wreckage, but a time capsule. Curved wings, twin booms, the cockpit, all intact, as if the pilot had stepped out moments earlier. Piece by piece, Glacier Girl rose from the ice like an ancient treasure hoisted from the ocean floor. When her parts finally rested on the surface, laid out in the polar sun, the team stood around her in stunned silence. Some wiped tears. Some placed hands on the fuselage like greeting an old friend. In that moment, they weren't salvaging metal. They were recovering a story, a chapter of a war frozen in time. Returning her to flight demanded yet another marathon of effort. The P-38 was an engineering marvel, but also a notoriously complex aircraft. 2 engines, twin-tail booms, intricate cooling systems, and airframes that required precision far beyond ordinary fighters. Every part had to be restored to exacting wartime standards. Where original components were too damaged, craftsmen recreated them from scratch, studying decades-old blueprints and manufacturing techniques. The project turned hangars into laboratories and workshops into temples of patience. And then at last came the day in 2002 when the world watched Glacier Girl roll onto the runway. She gleamed under the Kentucky sun, no longer icebound or forgotten, but reborn. The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with a growl that echoed across the airfield. When her wheels lifted from the tarmac, the crowd erupted, not just in celebration, but in awe. They were witnessing a resurrection. Glacier Girl soared, as though the 60 years between her last flight and this one meant nothing. She climbed, banked, and glided with the elegance that made the P-38 one of the most feared fighters of World War II. For a moment, everyone watching could almost see the frozen ridge of Greenland beneath her again, the 8 planes lined up in the snow, the crews clustering together against the wind. The past and present fused in a moment of pure wonder. The story doesn't end there. The hunt for the rest of the Lost Squadron continues. Over the years, researchers have refined radar, GPS mapping, and glaciology to better estimate where the other aircraft lie entombed. New scans suggest more P-38s remain intact, waiting patiently under the ice. Each could hold clues not just to aviation history, but to how glaciers move, how they preserve, and how they reshape the world across centuries. But Glacier Girl has already given us something rare. A tangible bridge between eras. She reminds us that history isn't dead. It sleeps, it hides, and sometimes if the conditions are right and the people searching are relentless enough, it rises again to take flight. Her survival is a testament to the machines built during America's wartime awakening, aircraft engineered with such precision and durability that even nature's coldest vault couldn't destroy them. It is also a testament to the explorers, engineers, and dreamers who refused to let a piece of the past stay buried. They looked at an empty white horizon and believed something extraordinary rested beneath it. Today, Glacier Girl stands as both a marvel and a message. A marvel because few aircraft have ever returned from such depths in flyable condition. A message because her story speaks to endurance, of metal, of memory, and of human spirit. She tells us that discovery is worth fighting for, that history can still surprise us, and that somewhere, under ice or sand or sea, the past is waiting. When Glacier Girl's wheels finally touched down after her first modern flight, the chief restorer whispered something only a few nearby could hear. Welcome back. And in that whisper lies the heart of the entire saga, a greeting across time, a celebration of a machine that defied odds, glaciers, storms, and decades. A reminder that even in the most remote and unforgiving corners of the world, stories endure, ready to be lifted into the sunlight again. The Lost Squadron may still rest beneath Greenland's frozen crown, but Glacier Girl has already broken free. Her wings, once trapped under 268 feet of ice, now cut through open sky once more. And every time she flies, she carries not just the legacy of the men who built her, or the pilots who trusted her, but the determination of the people who refused to let her memory fade. In her engines, you can still hear the echo of 1942. In her shadow, the unbroken line of history. And in her flight, the reminder that some stories will never stay buried.